Hey guys, welcome to this live stream about changing keys, and we're going to be using the circle of fifths to guide us in the process. As always, if you're part of the replay crew, let us know where you're coming from. And we're going to be geeking out about what's really an important part in the art of songwriting, which is the ability to change keys. Now, changing keys in a song is not all that common. It's not uncommon, but it's not the most common thing that you'll see in songs. And so when it does happen, it's interesting because it adds an element of variety in a song. It definitely changes the dynamic and movement of a chord progression and makes for some really interesting stuff. And so we're going to get into a specific song example and look at how this works in this song, how it can be done, and how a song basically moves from one tonal center or one tonic, one home base, as it were, and shifts into another home base. And then for the rest of the song, it changes key. And this song example came out of a conversation from the supporters live stream Q&A hangout that we did this last Saturday morning, where the song My Sweet Lord by George Harrison came up. And just on the fly, we were picking apart this song, and it was really interesting to dive into the chord progression and get a feel for what was going on there. And although we didn't talk about this on the open hour on Saturday, a really interesting part of the song is the key change. And so that's going to be the focus here. And we're going to use George Harrison's My Sweet Lord, like I say, to explore this topic. So this is George Harrison. I think he's actually playing the song that we're going to be picking apart here. And you can see one of the chords that we're going to find in the song. So it's a moment in time, a beautiful moment in time with some pretty sweet hair. You have to admit, he's got some locks going here. But more importantly than George Harrison's hair is the way that he used harmony and the art of chord and chord relationships to make this song work. So we're going to play around with this song, and you're going to see how he did what he did. So let's look at, let's look at the basic progression of the song. And the gist of it is, and like I said, we're going to use the circle of fifths to explore how this was done and see where within the circle of fifths, there's the circle of fifths, how the chords move and change keys. But before we get into the theory and the nerdiness of all that, let's get into the actual chord progression. And in essence, the song goes from the key of E major or E Ionian to F sharp major or F sharp Ionian. So this arrow right here is the key change that represents the key change. And it's one thing to just say, yeah, the song changes key. It's another to see how it was done. And we're going to look at why it's so brilliant in this song in particular, why this key change is like such a perfect addition for the song My Sweet Lord. Okay, so let's just kind of get a feel for the chord progression first. And I'm giving it away with the Roman numerals here as far as what the chord function is or how these chords serve specific purposes within this pattern. But just playing the progression itself, it goes from F sharp minor to a B a few times. So there's kind of this soothing progression of F sharp minor to B. And then it progresses to E to C sharp minor. F sharp minor to B. Okay, so basically what this progression is we are in the key of E. The progression for the first couple of measures, first 8 measures actually, goes back and forth between an F sharp minor and a B, which in the key of E are a minor 2 and a major 5. So in the circle of fifths, let's see how that works. Let's get into the key of E. So we're going to rotate into the key of E, E Ionian, which again is just a fancy name for E major. Let's get this in focus. And so in the key of E Ionian, the chords that we just played, the 4 chords that we just played, are in this grouping. They're in that key or within this mode, where we have E major as a major 1, F sharp minor is a minor 2, B is a major 5, and C sharp minor is a minor 6. So it's 2 5 2 5 1 6 1 6. So there's this kind of like pattern of 2 to 5, 1 to 6. And if the song just stayed within that small grouping within the circle of fifths, it would be fine. But we're going to see how the song actually starts to move around and expand into some other harmonic space, which not only adds variety, but as you'll see, totally reinforces the underlying idea that George Harrison was exploring at length in general and in the song lyrics and song itself more specifically. So let's look at what I'm talking about here. So again, just to kind of play that, we have minor 2, 2 of 5, minor 2 to 5, minor 2, and then E. I'm just playing that progression again to A6, 1, to a 6, C sharp minor, E, to E7, F sharp minor to B. That's the intro. And it just establishes that pattern, that general flow of chords. And then we get into the verse section, the first verse. And like I say, I never can really remember the lyrics of a song. So I'm just going to hum the melody in essence, but it's sweet Lord, oh my Lord. Then we go to that E. I really want to know you. And then it goes to this. It's a C sharp major chord. And then it goes into, well, let's look at what's going on here first. So let's just play that again really quick so you can get a feel for the progression. Notice that this chord is a C sharp major chord indicated by the uppercase Roman numeral 6, as opposed to these C sharp minor chords, which are lowercase 6s. And you're going to find this chord right here is the key to everything, pardon the pun, in that it's going to help us with that transition, with that key change. So what we're looking at here in terms of these chords of 2, 5, 1, minor 6, and major 6, and the circle of fifths, where those are within harmonic space, we already saw 4 of those. We have the 2, the 5, the 1, and the minor 6. C sharp minor is the minor 6. And then this major 6 over here, it's labeled as a D flat or a C sharp major. Those are enharmonic or synonymous names for the same chord. This major 6 is over here. It's outside of the key. It's outside of E major, but it makes sense for a reason, which we'll look at here. And so let's just go back and forth between, again, 2, 5, 1, 6, and then we play that major 6. So it's minor 2, 5, and then we're going to play the 1, minor 6, 1, minor 6, 1, and then we're going to play the major 6. And then it goes into, so we just looked at these chords. It goes back into verse 2, which is back into an F sharp minor and a 5. Now, why are we playing this major 6, this chord, way over here? And it's labeled as a major 6 because it's basically the minor 6 chord, the 6th chord, but it's major because it's in this inner ring. All of these chords in the inner ring are major chords. All of the chords in the middle ring are minor chords, shown by the lowercase Roman numerals. And then all of these chords in the perimeter are diminished chords. So instead of playing this minor 6 in the middle ring, we're going to this major 6 in the inner ring. And the reason for that, the reason that it sounds compatible, even though it's outside of the key or outside of this mode, the boundary of E Ionian ends here, but we're leaping all the way over here. The reason it works is because one way we could refer to this chord as a major 6, we could also call it the 5 of 2, or the dominant of the minor 2 chord. In other words, it's a secondary dominant. So in the circle of fifths, the progression going in a counterclockwise direction, this 5, B to E, is a natural progression. Those 2 chords are harmonically related. The colors indicate it. Also, their positions within the circle of fifths show that they're close neighbors. They're harmonically related. So the 5 of 1 is just the 5, and it resolves to the 1. You can see how the minor 6, C sharp minor, is just clockwise, or just neighbors to F sharp minor. And we could play a C sharp minor to an F sharp minor. Those 2 chords sound nice together. But instead of C sharp minor or a minor 6 to minor 2, let's play the major 6, or C sharp major to F sharp minor, or major 6 to minor 2. And it sounds really nice. It's the C sharp major wants to resolve to that minor 2. So instead of going from minor 6 to minor 2, we're going major 6 to minor 2. And that secondary dominant, or the 5 of 2, is what brings this progression of this this major 6. The reason this major 6 flows nicely back into verse 2 of the minor 2 is because of that secondary dominant relationship. So George Harrison very cleverly introduces this major 6 and it adds some variety, because you think you're going to go to this minor 6, because we've been going 1 to minor 6 and then 1 to minor 6. So he kind of gets you feeling that, okay, next time we hit a 1, we're going to go to a minor 6. No, he goes to a major 6, which adds a little more variety and also leads very well into verse 2, which begins with that F sharp minor, or the minor 2, which then cycles through and repeats that progression of minor 2, 5, minor 2, 5, 1, or 2 to 5, again to 2 to 5, and then he's going to do it again. E, the 1 to a minor 6, E, the 1 to a minor 6, and then E to a major 6. Okay, that sounds beautiful, and it brings us into verse 3, which again goes back into that pattern of minor 2 to 5. So he's done it twice to us now. He's cycled through and he's set up that 1 to minor 6, and you think that's what's going to happen, and then that 1 to that major 6 brings us back into that 2. Now, what's really interesting about this pattern is he's establishing the key by bringing us back to E again, and the song could just end on E, and it's like, it could be done, but it's not done, because he keeps that flywheel spinning and that momentum going with the chord progression. But what's really cool is after he plays verse 3, he goes into an interlude. So let's play verse 3. It's the same pattern we've played. So it's minor 2 to 5. You know that. We've played it a number of times already. And then the interlude is cool because he hangs out on this E longer than usual. And there's this kind of build up, and this is when the key change happens in the song. It's E. I really want to know you. I really want to know you. I really want to know you, love. I really want to know you, love, but I just can't get along. So what I just played was the key change. I'm going to slow it down a little bit so we can like play it in slow motion to really catch what happened here. But it's brilliant, like I say, just as far as the chord progression goes, because it flows well, but also because metaphorically it matches, I think, what he's trying to say in the song. which is this. He's basically saying, he sings Hare Krishna. You know, he had studied under the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in India, and there was George Harrison, and he was into the idea of reincarnation. And my sweet Lord, he's like trying to ascend to this higher realm of consciousness and literally shifts up a whole step into a higher range, into a higher key. And it's almost like the song was transcended into a reincarnated state. I don't know how consciously he did this, but I think it works really well. And it has an emotional power to it that matches what he's singing about, which is brilliant. I don't think he did it on accident. And if he did it subconsciously, it was especially brilliant. But let's just play this interlude again. So it's I really want to know you. And he goes to E7. Know you. I really want to know you, Lord. And he goes, so he's playing that 5. Sorry, this actually should, well, okay. Why are we calling this a 5? Because so far we've been calling it a major 6. In the circle of fifths, we've been saying in the key of E that this C sharp major chord is a 6. But it's because once the key shifts into F sharp, it is a 5. So basically this, what was a major 6 in the key of E, and bringing us to cycle back to the minor 2 in each verse section so far in the song, when he hits this 5, or when he hits this C major chord and hangs on it, it actually is what shifts us. Sorry, one more. Oh, we're gonna need to go over one more key. It's what shifts us into F sharp major, because after this C major chord, we land on F sharp major. And F sharp major becomes the tonal home base. And the chord progression is the same as before. We go to G sharp minor to a C sharp major chord, or a minor 2 to a 5, and from a 1 to a 6. But now we've shifted keys to F sharp major. So it's G sharp minor to C sharp major, and then F sharp major to D sharp minor. So it's still just a 2, 5, 1, 6. To say that more easily, because all of the numbers are a mouthful. To say G sharp minor, it's just, I'm stumbling over my words. But the cool thing is the numerals are consistent from one key to the next. So you can just say, okay, we're still playing the same progression, but shifted over in the circle of fifths, 2, 5, 1, 6. So let's go back to the progression and play that one more time, because it is a beautiful thing. So I really want to know you. I really want to know you. Okay, the key changes right here. I want to know you, Lord. I really want to know you, Lord. But you can't come on. Okay, now we're into the verse 4. Notice how the numerals have changed. The numerals are the same. The chords have changed, but the progression is consistent. So it's minor 2. So the song is higher in pitch. So there's kind of this, like, even just by rising up in pitch, there's almost like a more vibrant or energetic vibe to it. And that's mirrored in the song's production by the drums kind of come in at this point, and it becomes more of a kind of chorus and higher produced song at that point, as if he had been translated or reincarnated into another state. So minor 2 to 5, minor 2 to 5, minor 2 to 5, and then it's recognizable, same numerals, just different chords. So it's 1, 6, 1, 6, 1, and then a major 6, and then back to minor 1 and 5. Now, in theory, what would be cool is he could just go through, he meaning George Harrison, could take us on multiple cycles of reincarnation using the same idea of secondary dominance. In theory, he could go 1, so we're in F sharp major, and then 5, and then G sharp major, could bring us to that, and then go. And just keep going. It's the same idea of a secondary dominant helping transition into another key. So let's look at the circle of fifths one more time to see what happened here, because seeing it in the context of harmonic space does help. If we're looking at the chord progression here, it can you can follow along because it's showing you literally what chords to play, what fingers to press on the instrument. But looking at the chord map, we have a better sense of theoretically what's happening within harmonic space. So let's just retrace our steps here. We're playing in the key of E. We start out E Ionian. So 2, 5, 2, 5, 1 minor 6. And then we do it again. We go 1 minor 6, 1 minor 6, and then he throws us a curveball. Instead of going 1 to minor 6, we go 1 to major 6, which is very similar. The C sharp minor chord is very similar to C major. This major chord is the 5 of 2, and so it brings us back into the minor chord again. And then we cycle again through 1 minor 6, 1 major 6, and instead of treating this as a major 6 that resolves to a minor 2, when we shift keys in the interlude, we just treat it, instead of playing a major 6, it's now a major 5 to a 1. And so we've made that shift to another key. So this one, while we're playing this chord, while we're playing this major 6 in the key of E, kind of blurry. While we're playing this major 6 in the key of E, the key quickly shifts over. My fingers can quickly shift over. And instead of coming back over here, we just land on that major 1 and then just cycle through 2, 5, 2, 5. And it's like a little harmonic switcheroo. It's a little harmonic switcheroo. While we're playing that chord, we just land on that F sharp major and continue on as if nothing happened. It almost feels as if, you're eating and someone comes in and, the old vaudeville trick of pulling the tablecloth out from under you. It's like it happens so quick that it seems as if nothing changed. But, when you look down, you start eating from a different plate because the shift was so quick and so seamless, using a secondary dominant as that portal or as that conduit into another key. It's a beautiful thing. And let me pull up the next diagram so you can see. I was looking at this on the chord map, but you can see here as well that once within the key of F sharp, we're now in F sharp Ionian, which is a fancy name for the key of F sharp major. And it's the same pattern of minor 2, major 5, 1, minor 6, and now the major 6 is a D sharp major chord. But it leads back into that G sharp minor chord. Same numerals, different chord names. And again, that interlude is where it happens, where the song shifts. And actually, you know what? Let me make sure that this diagram is correct too. Oh, you know what? I did. Oh, no, that's correct. So the interlude does have this 5, and then it goes to the new 1. But really, we could say that the chord change or the key change happened right there, where now E was a 1 just a moment ago, and now F sharp is a 1. But really, I think the key change happens with that secondary dominant turned dominant. It's no longer a secondary dominant. It's now a dominant in that new key. It was secondary in the key of E, and the actual dominant itself in the key of F sharp. So yeah, George Harrison, My Sweet Lord. I've always liked this song, and I've always thought it was a really beautiful song. And as it is with all of these song insights, to pick apart the song and see what's going on really through the lens of music theory sheds new light on things, and always makes me appreciate these songs more. I'm like, man, that song is actually more intentional and beautiful and cool than meets the eye or the ear on first or even the 500th listen. There's something about music theory that makes it more meaningful. So Let's jump into some of the comments and geek out about all of this good stuff. So in just one moment, hold on just one sec as we get geared up for chatting about all this good stuff. Marcus USA, cool. Thanks for being on. This seems to all be pre-recorded. Would be nice to have a question answer period scheduled later. So thank you for your comment. And no, I am saying give a video. Yeah, so give me 1 week to go over it and get my questions. So like Q&A period would be 524. I like your comment. And the cool thing about, oh, here, let me get, I'm going to go through your comments and then I will speak to it. So to continue on with your comments, that is less than a week, but that is an example. So teach something, give the student time to explore, and then come back and get questions. It is way too overwhelming to expect questions now. It's understandable. Actually, that's interesting. I know if you're familiar with Khan Academy, Salman Khan, I believe is his name, who started Khan Academy. I remember reading something he talked about where flipping the traditional classroom structure on its head, where you present some information and then have a discussion afterward. This is kind of a truncated or condensed version of that idea, in that I lay out some ideas and then chat on the tail end of these live streams. That said, though, for the supporters open hour this last Saturday, we started out with a discussion and kind of a continuation of the last live stream we did here on YouTube, which was about the Animals performance of House of the Rising Sun, where it was about a week later, five days later. So that worked out well, this last supporters open hour. If you go to mycolormusic.com, if you're not on locals in the community there, definitely check it out. And every week we have an open discussion and geek out about this kind of stuff. But thank you for your feedback, because you make a good point. And hopefully this chat here can at least address some of the questions, although to your point, it's not maybe enough time to fully absorb all of the topics. Owl, hey, it's cool to see you on. So the new sixth takes us up a pitch. Yes. So let me go to this. So the new sixth, very succinctly said, I like how you said it, basically in a nutshell, that what was a six and brought us to this minor two, this six, it's going to resolve to this chord. And yes, it basically resolves to that F sharp major, which is up a whole step from F sharp, is a whole step up from E. In the circle of fifths, it's a whole step. You can see the difference between whole steps by all of the squares are whole steps, all of the circles are whole steps. This is the circle of fifths, but on the keyboard itself, you have that same pattern of all of the whole steps, all of the squares are whole tones or whole steps separated from each other, and all of the circles are whole steps from each other. The only difference between the circle of fifths and the chromatic scale is that they've been rotated. All of the squares have swapped places with each other. Each pair of complementary colors, or tritones in the vernacular of music, have shifted. So C used to be where F sharp was. C wants to be between F and G, and F sharp wants to be between B and C sharp, and likewise for all of the other notes. But yes, that's in essence, the sixth takes us up a pitch by resolving to that new tonal home base, which is F sharp. Many vibes. Cool. I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for being on. So you're saying that this song is reincarnated. The second half of the song seems to have been reincarnated into a transcended higher projection of reality. Yes. And the song is, in essence, that's the theme of the song. Al, so if you go to the left for the sixth, you would go down a pitch. Okay. I like, that's a good question. So let's explore that. And maybe if I read into your question, it seems as though, sixth is down. So how would you go up in pitch if you go to the sixth, which seems like it's down? Maybe I'm misinterpreting your question, but just to explore that idea here. Okay. Let's say we have E is we start in the key of E. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the E major scale in the E Ionian mode. Okay, so E is 1, F sharp is 2, G sharp is 3, and so on. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7, 1. So that C sharp is down from C, but because music is cyclical, it's also up from E. So it's one. I said C, but I meant E. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's up here. So it's either up or it's down, depending on which direction you're going. And this this major 6 is also the 5 of the 2. So E to F sharp is a 2. That's a whole step up from E. And this 6, it's a 6 to E, but it's a 5 to the 2. And so it's easier to see in the circle of fifths because of that, because all of the fifths are neighbors. So they're right next door to each other, and you can see how it's right next to that F sharp, and it wants to resolve to the F sharp. That might have been kind of circular reasoning, partly because music itself is circular and cyclical. So hopefully that was at least somewhat clarifying. But yes, the 6 is the 5 in the next key. Hey Peter, it's cool to see you on. And so cool, you just ordered the Circle of Fifths wheel. Not an easy concept to master. This is Roman numeral key chord progression changes in the middle of the song. Yes, and I'm glad that you're getting ChordMap because it's so fun to play with and get your hands on and make music theory, which is conceptual, make it tangible. Literally, your hands can manipulate and play around with in touch theory. Yeah, and normally songs don't change key in the middle of a song. I mean, sometimes they do. And when you kind of know how it's done, or in this case, exactly how it's done in this specific example, it like allows you to kind of think that way and maybe even incorporate it into your own songs. But yeah, it's normally not done because it is a little more advanced and a little more adventurous in the art of songwriting. James, hey James, cool to see you on. So thanks for all the assistance with comprehension. I'm glad it's helpful, and I'm so glad you're here and geeking out about music theory. Music theory always seemed incomprehensible to me for the longest time. It always seemed so abstract, and it's partly because I was trying to see it through or think of it through the lens of traditional notation, the rigid staff lines and spaces, the medieval man-made archaic and arbitrary symbols of traditional notation, rather than looking at it through the actual cyclical natural patterns that are really at the heart of music, actually form the real framework of music. Once you realize that it's really geometry on steroids, that it's really just cyclical patterns and consistent patterns at that, and that it's totally accessible, and you can even bypass traditional notation to really make sense of this, it opens up music in a way that was frustratingly inaccessible to me for the longest time. Anyway, I'm glad it helps. Many vibes. You feel so unenlightened. Well, hopefully as you play around with the song, I'm actually going to be adding the chord progressions to the post on Locals, so that you can play around with it and really absorb it through your fingertips and have the signals run through your hands into your mind. Because it's one thing to kind of talk through it and add a pretty quick clip as I am here, where I'm maybe talking a little too fast and walking through the examples a little too quickly, to be able to play the progressions and look at the diagrams yourself at your own pace, hopefully really helps. And maybe you will feel so enlightened that you feel like you've transcended into a higher harmonic realm midway through the song, right about that C sharp major chord. Glenn, hello. Can you begin adding heat maps in future song analyses? I found them to be great ways to see the structure at a glance. That is a great question and a great suggestion. And yeah, I can look at doing the, especially for So the heat maps, like we looked at with the chord function, specifically relate to the major key. So a major key where a major 1 is the tonic. And we explored those with the circle of thirds and the heat maps, and with the diagrams in lesson 7 of the music theory course. The playlist is, if you go to mycolormusic.com, there's the playlist there. Yeah, the heat maps are especially helpful. One thing that brings up a point on this, that especially with key changes. So with the circle of thirds is helpful for seeing the different chord function in a song when you're in a major key. When it gets into secondary dominants and borrowed chords and shifting keys, the circle of fifths is where it's at, because that allows you to expand beyond a single key, which is really what the circle of thirds does. Like, it puts the horse blinders on in terms of harmonic options, and the circle of fifths opens that up, and the geometry of the relationships then guides how to then select chords and move from one key or mode to the next. I kind of speaking past what you're saying, and I don't mean to just talk about the circle of thirds or just talk about the circle of fifths, when, to your point, the heat maps can be very helpful. So all that to say, when I can add those diagrams, especially to a major key, I agree, it can really help. That was a long answer to a short point. Rod, it's cool to see you on. So the 60s song Runaway, Del Shannon, yes, switches from Aeolian verse to Ionian chorus. That's cool. I'll need to check that out. I actually was first introduced to Runaway, speaking of George Harrison, through, I think, if I remember right, the Traveling Wilburys, the super group that George Harrison was in, did a cover of Runaway, which is like the ultimate honor to have the people in the Traveling Wilburys cover your song. How cool is that? It's like the ultimate, and their version is really cool. So I did not know that, because I haven't opened up the hood on Runaway to pick it apart. So that would be a fun one to dive into. And it switches from Aeolian in the verse to Ionian in the chorus. That's cool. I think I can kind of hear that in my head if I play it in my head. So that would be a good one to play with. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. So switching between modes rather than full on keys, like in this example, we're going from E major to F sharp major. It's going from Aeolian to Ionian. That's cool. I like that. Hey, Dave. Harrison was sued by Motown Group for the song "Sounded Like He's So Fine." Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I forgot to kind of speak to that. Yeah, so I remember hearing a story that George Harrison, I guess, during that court proceeding, had to testify and literally bring his guitar into court and play, the chord progression to like make a case for why it was distinct from. And I couldn't remember the song, but it's called "He's So Fine." That's interesting. And he said that process of playing guitar in court and trying to defend his own songwriting really messed him up, his creative juices. It kind of like tightened the tap down on the creative flow, because playing guitar in court is probably the worst venue of any musician, but it's called "He's So Fine." That's interesting. Yeah, interesting. So maybe he played that song and he was like, this would be perfect for a song about reincarnation, or maybe it was just coincidental. David, so how would you bring it back to home from the key of dominance, from a dominant 7 to a dominant key change, the 5? So are you saying, how would we get back from F sharp major to E major in this case? So it would be, using a secondary dominant, it would be via the 5 to bring it back to a B to an E if you wanted to use the same technique anyway. So I have to play around with that, because definitely using the same technique of rising up a whole step, you could go to that major 6. and then from a 5 to, and depending on where you're coming from, like if you're coming from F major, that 5 of 1 would be a 4 to F sharp. So in other words, if you were coming from B, so in F sharp, the B sharp or the 5 of the flat major 7 or the secondary dominant to the flat major 7 chord, E in the key of F sharp is over here. You'd have to play a 4 to bring it to that 5, which would introduce a different kind of chord in the harmonic structure to the progression so far. So in this particular song, we haven't played a 4. So there would probably be a little bit of you'd have to introduce some chords to naturally flow to a B in this case to bring it back to E, assuming we're coming from just one shift over to F sharp. That's a really good question. But using that same technique, yeah, you could use a secondary dominant. It would just have to be a 4 in the key of F sharp. Owl, okay, thank you for your question on the chord books. So the chord books are, I've made some really good progress earlier today, where Chord Book 2 has turned out to be, I would estimate, 5 to 6 times harder and more painful than I expected, partly because I basically finished Chord Book 2 last Saturday virtually, and then found that it was going to end up being like 730 pages long, which was a page or two higher than I expected. And so the idea was I need to get that down. So I had to go back and make some things smaller and to fit on the pages better. And so I'm looking to finish Chord Book 2 this weekend. In the process of Chord Book 2, so the estimated time of arrival, the release will come somewhat shortly after that. Part of what I found in working on Chord Book 2, so if you don't know, if I haven't explained, I haven't explained in this video. So if you're new to the idea of these chord books, Chord Book 1 is basically a bunch of different chords in different inversions organized by chord root. And then Chord Book 2 is specifically curating or collecting chords that are compatible based on key and mode. And so each chord book has its value. Not every chord in Chord Book 2 is, or Chord Book 1 has every chord, whereas Chord Book 2 organizes the chords in ways that are more compatible and more conducive to songwriting, I should say, and using chords that work together in a progression. And as I was working on Chord Book 2, I found that errors or just little fixes that I had to make in the diagrams for Chord Book 1 in spots. And so I'm glad that I hadn't released Chord Book 1 because I would have been like, I had to make those fixes. So it's been helpful to kind of just be applying brushstrokes to both canvases as I go. Long answer to a short question, but they're coming along well, and we'll be done here in the coming weeks. So thank you for your question, and I'm excited to get them out there. Hey, Mark, I just got my circle of fifths or circle chart today. Awesome, thank you. And what does the O on all of the outer rings signify? Just a diminished scale. Okay, that's a great question. Let's look at the chord book here. So the major chords are indicated by an uppercase Roman numeral. So all of the major chords are in this inner ring. All of the minor chords are lowercase Roman numerals in this middle ring. And then all of these are diminished chords. So this little O is a musical symbol for diminished. I didn't make up the little O symbol. That's a standard symbol for diminished. And a diminished chord is even weaker sounding than a major chord. And so it's from major to minor to diminished. And definitely check out the playlists on mycolormusic.com under one of the tabs. I can't remember what the tab's called, but there's the library tab and then there's the other tab, and I can't remember what it's called. But there's a playlist specifically for the chord map to kind of get you up and running and get a feel for playing around with it. So that's awesome. I'm so excited. It's you have it. Marcellus, cool to have you on. You can use the system to add meaning to your songs like Reincarnation. You can also use meaning of the colors like red is power, blue is intelligence, green is earth, etc. It's very interesting. And yeah, the visuals, you can apply the visuals as you go. I have a tendency not to add significance to the colors in that, the blues, for example, you don't have to be in the key of A flat to write a song in the blues. But the connections between the colors definitely highlight the underlying geometry and yeah, help with navigating. It's fun. Music theory is definitely geeky and fun and all of that, especially when you can make sense of what you're doing, which is what it's all about. Rastalate, hello, thanks for being on. When the chord book is ready, how will we get a copy? That's a great question. So it'll be available at mycolormusic.com in the shop there. And I'll definitely be talking about the chord books as they roll out. I'm not going to sneak it out there. I'll be talking about it a lot and making it very clear on where to find it and how you can use the different resources and all of that. So I'm excited. I'm very excited. I can't say how excited I am. It's honestly, the chord books are way harder than I anticipated. And it's been grueling in a beautiful way, in a masochistically beautiful way. Raul, where can you buy the Circle of Fifths wheel? This chord map, thank you, Virtuous Heretic, is at that link right there. So if you go to the shop.mycolormusic.com, chord maps are there, and different stuff like the instrument labels, guitar, keyboard, and all of that. To tie it all together, to be able to see how these patterns relate from one instrument to the next, and conceptually on the chord map has helped me. I can definitely say when I first played these different songs back in the day, it just seemed so random. The chord progressions seemed so magical in an inaccessible, almost surreal kind of way. And to be able to actually make sense of the patterns, it doesn't diminish. Sometimes people will say, oh, music theory is too dry or too analytical. When really, I think ignorance is not bliss. Knowledge is power when it comes to understanding theory. Theory actually is not a wet blanket on creativity, but the fuel to the fire. To know what you're doing, I guarantee George Harrison knew what he was doing. He might not have known the terminology of secondary dominant, but he knew that those chords were related and they had that harmonic structure to them to make the key change possible in the song. So yes, this is My Sweet Lord, George Harrison. It's a beautiful one. And I'm adding the chord diagrams, like I say, the different diagrams that go with this live stream with the post on local so that you can pick it apart and play along at your own pace and get a feel for it. And that wraps it up for this one. Thank you for joining. This was a lot of fun. And we will be talking real soon. And if you can make it to the next open hour, supporters open hour on locals this next Saturday, we'll be geeking out about the next topic at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. So that's like Denver time on Saturday. So hopefully I'll see you then. Have a great rest of your day, evening, night, wherever you are, and we'll see you real soon.